Hi, I'm Meghan Telpner and I have an amazing interview for you today. I'm so excited to share with you my conversation with an amazing woman, Marion Nestle. She is a feisty fighter, truthful, honest food advocate. She's written some great books. I've got them here. They're all highlighted. What to Eat. This will sort of explain it all to you. Food Politics, which is so good and might just put you into a rage of blackoutness, anger because of what goes on in the realm of food politics. I'll be honest, I was a little bit nervous to talk to her. She is a legend, one of the most powerful people in food of our time. And I hope you sincerely enjoy this interview. If you would like to listen to it as a podcast, go to my blog at meghantelpner.com, select blog. You can listen to it, download it, share this interview. This is so important, such great information, and I hope you enjoy it. Hey, thank you so much for joining me. I know you're an incredibly busy woman. My first question for you is, you got into food and food policy and food politics very early in your career. What fueled your initial interest?
Well, I've always been interested in food, and I was given a course to teach when I was a new instructor, and that course immediately got me into the whole question of the politics of food, because I could see right away that you couldn't really teach nutrition in the traditional way without talking about the many influences on what people eat. And once you start talking about food and culture, you quickly go into the political aspects of it. So I would say I've been interested in it right from the beginning.
Wow, that's amazing. And you were at one point the associate dean at University of California, San Francisco School of Medicine teaching nutrition.
I was. Yes.
which is amazing. What are your thoughts on the way nutrition is currently being taught and handled and practiced by our modern medical community?
Well, I was teaching nutrition to medical students in the late 1970s and early 1980s. And there was already a 20-year history of concerns about the lack of nutrition education for medical students. And now it's 25 years later and nothing has changed.
Right.
So there's now a 45-year, almost 50-year history of extraordinary concern that doctors don't know anything about nutrition, and nothing has changed in all of this time. There may be some changes occurring now that obesity has become a major national problem, because so much of medical practice, at least in primary care, has to do with people who want to lose weight or have to manage type 2 diabetes or whatever their particular problem is. But doctors are still approaching these kinds of problems without really having much understanding of nutrition.
Right. So, but do you think that, because, we know there's challenges with the sort of government food guides, if nutrition will be taught according to the food guides, if that is actually going to help the problem?
Well, I'm not sure that's the best way to teach it. I think that the first thing that doctors need to know is what their patients are up against when they try to eat a healthy diet. And that gets you into food politics right away. I think doctors should be teaching patients that the entire environment of food choice is set up to try to get them to eat more and more of the wrong kinds of foods, and that they as individuals are fighting enormous, powerful forces in society with a great deal of money, whose entire purpose is to get people to eat more, not less.
Right. So a lot of what we sort of hear about in conventional nutritional, sort of in quotes, wisdom is this idea of the calorie. And I know you've done extensive research and writing on the idea that the calorie doesn't count. What was the history? How did the calorie become sort of this dictator of whether we're choosing the right foods or not?
Well, I don't think it is the dictator. we need enough calories to maintain body weight and get energy to do what we need to do. They're really impossible for anybody to measure accurately, and I don't think anybody should be paying any attention to them at all. I think people should be paying attention to portion size. And that's the bottom line from my most recent book, Why Calories Count, is yes, they count for body weight, but if you want to eat healthfully, you need to pay attention to where those calories come from.
Right.
And if weight is a problem, you got to do something about portion size, because that's the big problem.
Right. And where does I love your, the red, yellow, green traffic light system. So how do you see that fitting in, and how can that sort of better improve the nutritional guidelines that we're intended to follow?
Well, I think you're talking about the red, green, and yellow traffic lights that people are proposing get put on the front of packages as a sort of one color designation of whether the food is good for you, bad for you, or indifferent. It will never happen in the United States. And the reason why it won't happen is that everybody understands that if something has a red light on it, it's not something they're supposed to be eating. And the early experiments using this kind of labeling system in Great Britain showed that indeed having red traffic lights on packages made people not buy the products. The food industry objects to them so strongly that I don't see how they could ever be implemented.
Right, right. Recently, I'm sure you were familiar with some of the comments from Dr. Oz quoting that sort of shifting to organic is undemocratic, reserved for the 1%. And we know that there's an issue with sort of the accessibility of good food for everyone. What are your feelings on this?
Well, I haven't heard Dr. Oz's statements, but I think organics should be for everybody. And the reason that they're not for everybody is that our political system supports the production of some foods but not others. And it does not particularly support the production of organic fruits and vegetables, or for that matter, fruits and vegetables in general. Fruits and vegetables are considered specialty crops. They get no special government support. The government support goes to corn and soybeans that are used to feed animals,
right,
and to other foods that are not necessarily part of a healthful diet. So what we really need to do is to bring our agricultural system in line with our health policy, and that would make a very big difference in people's health.
When you sit in, I mean, you're a member of so many boards, and you've been so actively involved in the U.S. government with the FDA and everything. When you sit in these meetings, are you challenged by what sort of, I can only imagine what's being said, and because, there's so much, with the private sector and what the government's instituting for the population. What are some of the biggest challenges in making this available for everybody, and sort of what, from a government perspective?
Well, I'm really not involved in government in any way whatsoever at this point, and haven't been for years. I'm considered way too controversial.
I would imagine.
To be on government committees. But the government sees its role as balancing the interests of constituents, but some constituents have more power than others. And right now we're in an era of American history when corporations have an extraordinary amount of power. And this comes about through our election campaign laws that allow virtually unlimited contributions to candidates for elected office. And until we clean up our electoral campaign laws, we're going to have a corrupt government, and there's really nothing we can do about it. Right.
So in saying that, you recently commented on the fact that the proposed soda tax wasn't passed in, I think it was San Francisco, they were doing it. And then, with the sort of loss of Proposition 37, or whether or not those votes are finally counted yet, what do these two losses tell us about the current state of food politics?
Well, I think those election initiatives were very important, even though the Richmond and El Monte soda tax initiatives failed. Uh, they raised the issue and they gave an idea to lots and lots of other communities. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more communities look at soda taxes as a way of generating money to pay for health clinics and other kinds of social purposes, and also to try to do something to reverse trends in obesity that are increasingly linked to consumption of sodas and other fast foods and other kinds of unhealthy foods. And what I see is this nationwide interest in trying to reverse obesity trends and trying to figure out, and everybody understands that individuals are making choices in an environment in which they are being sold over and over and over again on eating more, not less.
Right.
And that the environment has to change, and taxes are an environmental initiative. Caps on sizes are an environmental initiative. And eventually, I think the public will come to understand that these are not, in fact, infringements on freedom and personal choice, but instead are efforts to make it easier for people to make healthier choices.
Right. So how would you see that comparing to the concept of, self-responsibility, where people believe they should be able to self-govern themselves or decide whether their children have chocolate milk at school? How does the tax compare with taking on personal responsibility?
Well, people make their choices and exercise personal responsibility in an environment in which they are encouraged by billions of dollars to eat things that are not good for them.
Right.
And everybody thinks that, we all like to think that we're not influenced by advertising. If we weren't influenced by advertising, nobody would bother to advertise.
Right.
Obviously, advertising is effective, and there's an enormous amount of research that shows that television advertising enormously influences the choices of the food choices and preferences of young children, for example. And we as a society could take steps that would make it much, much easier to manage what children are eating and to avoid fights in families over food if we had a food environment that was more conducive to healthy eating. I think that will eventually come, but it's going to take a long educational process to bring people along to understand that a cap on soda, that a 16-ounce soda is not small and is not an infringement of their personal freedom. They can always order 4 of them if they want to.
We can't encourage that. So what are some of the things that you think families could do now if they wanted to take on something to end that food fight at every meal because their kids don't want, the fresh food and they want their boxed macaroni and cheese?
Well, the easiest way is to set up house rules. And if you don't want your kids eating junk food, you can't have junk food in the house. You just simply don't buy it. And you tell your kids, this is what we do in our family. Too bad for you. This is the family you're stuck with. This is how it works. And boy, do kids adjust quickly. They're not going to self-starve. They're going to eat what's available, and eventually they're going to learn how to eat more healthfully, and they'll thank you for it later on.
Absolutely. I call it health washing, when brands label certain things as healthy, we see Jell-O with antioxidants, that kind of thing. What are some of, in your opinion, currently the worst culprits of, food marketing or health washing that is deceiving today's population?
Well, I don't think you can buy a product in a supermarket that doesn't have a health claim on it. It's the only thing that sells food these days. And there's now a substantial amount of research that suggests that any health claim on a product makes people think it has fewer calories. So if you put an organic label on a product, people think it has fewer calories than if it wasn't organic. And companies know this, and that's why they fight so hard to have health claims on food products. And you just go walk down an aisle and take a look at them. I don't know, the funniest one, because I'm particularly interested in calories.
Yeah.
The one Total cereal now has a label on it that says 100 hard-working calories per serving. Hard-working?
Yeah.
Okay. Some marketer dreamed that up. It's adorable.
Right, right. Yeah, it continues to astound me, and the challenge, I guess, and you see it too, is that people are trying to do the right thing, and it's hard to get the unfiltered education that's just true and honest because, isn't a lot of money to be made in shopping at the farmer's market, unfortunately.
There is not. And I mean, it is for farmers, and if everybody did a little shopping at farmers markets, that would make a big difference to the farmers who were producing those healthier foods. My rules for healthy eating are to stay out of the center aisles of supermarkets, although supermarkets have figured out that people understand that, and they've started moving junk foods into the produce sections now.
Yeah, I've noticed that too.
But in general, you just don't buy foods in packages. You don't buy them if they have ingredients you can't pronounce, more than 5 ingredients, because those are all signs of heavy processing. I try not to buy anything that has a cartoon on it, on the package, because they're advertising those products to kids, and I don't think that food companies should be permitted to market directly to children. So those kinds of things are kind of guidelines, and if you don't want your kids eating junk food, you just don't have it in the house.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Yeah. So if there was one thing that you could recommend for consumers to do right now to start to change the food landscape, what is it that we could all do to make changes?
Stop drinking sugary drinks.
Mm-hmm.
That's the number one stopping place if you're concerned about body weight, is you just cut out the sugary drinks.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
No, my pleasure.
And we will link to your website. Your blog is at foodpolitics.com.
That's right.
And you write for various publications. So I want to thank you so much for your time, and we'll get this up and start sharing this information with a new audience.
Terrific. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Marion. Have a great day.